The Audi A3 has been with us since 1996 and it quickly made a name for itself as the go-to desirable family hatchback for a lot of people. Now, with the latest generation car, Audi are describing the A3 as sporty, fully connected and digitalised, a word I've not been able to pronounce correctly in all of these takes. But how does that marketing language translate into real life, and more importantly, does this, the latest generation Audi A3, deserve to be as much of a success as the previous models? Let's take a close look to try and find out. Right, so first up, let's have a quick run through the Audi A3 model lineup. It is available in either petrol or diesel flavour with both manual and automatic gearboxes on offer. Having said that, if a bit of electrification is more your style, then don't worry because the TFSI-E plug-in hybrid model has you covered. Now moving on to the trim levels, and the A3 Sportback is available in one of 4 specifications. The range kicks off with the Technic model, which despite sitting at the bottom of the A3 tree, still comes with plenty of standard equipment. Above that there is Sport, S-Line and Vorsprung. What about the car that we have sat here? Well, this A3 is finished in Sport specification, so it is one up from the base level cars. But you know what? I reckon as long as you don't have your heart set on the 15mm lower ride height and the bigger alloys that come as part of the S-Line and above packages, this trim level is perhaps the one to go for. I know it might sound ridiculous as it is called the Sport, or the Sport trim rather, but I think it looks just about sporty enough to justify that criteria that I identified at the start of this video. So coming around the front then, the sport cars do receive some silver accents around here. You also have a chrome grille and that little detail along the bottom of the bumper. You do also get chrome window surrounds and the rear bumper has some extra treatment to it too. And all of these things just help this level of A3 stand out from the crowd just that little bit. Now coming down the side, and the A3 in sport specification does receive 17-inch alloys opposed to the 16s, and I think that is probably quite a worthy upgrade, as in 2021 the 16-inch alloys that you'll find on the base spec car probably look a little bit lost in the arches. Now as we pull back a little bit, another thing I'm a big fan of in this particular spec is the Atoll blue paint. Now I will admit I am a sucker for anything blue, but I think it is a worthy upgrade. It does cost £575, so obviously you can make your own decisions on that. But it is a nice metallic-y paint and it does help set this car off and make it look nicely sophisticated. Like I say though, whether it is worth the money is up to you. Overall then, I think it's quite a sporty and sophisticated looking little hatchback, but obviously looks are a personal thing. So what I want you guys to do is to get into the comment section below. Let me know what you think of the latest generation Audi A3. Right, so moving around to the back of the car, and you'll be able to see that the A3 has a 380 litre boot, which is par for the course in this class. Handily, the boot floor can be moved up and down, and with those seats folded down there is plenty of space, with capacity growing to 1200 litres. At this point it is worth noting that the 40-20-40 split folding rear bench that you can see here is replaced by a 40-60 folding bench on the lower down Technic models. Moved into the back of the cabin, and as you can see I do just about fit, although I would hardly describe the back of the A3 as cavernous. For reference, I'm 5'11" and that driving position is set up so that I'm comfortable. Right then, so to the front of the Audi A3, and as you'd expect is a very nice place to be. The first thing you're going to notice is you've got a nice sculpted dashboard. There is also plenty of plate in the steering wheel and the seat, so you can get comfy very easily. Then your eyes are obviously going to be drawn to these two 10-inch screens. They are just over 10-inch screens, and I think they more than justify Audi saying the latest A3 is a digitalised car. As you'd expect, they do everything you'd want, and there is plenty of functionality. I think the most impressive thing about them though is that they are standard on all A3s. You can get a bigger virtual cockpit if you desire, but you have to step up, I think it is to the Vorsprung model for that, and personally I don't really see why you'd want anything bigger. This one offers all the functionality you'd need. So just quickly, I will just quickly show you that you can change all sorts on this. As you'd expect, it is almost infinitely configurable to show whatever you want. So these arrows scroll through your main menus, and then you can go up and down within menus to see other information. If we go back to the map, pressing view will change it, and in fact that will change it on anything, I believe. So if I go across to there, yeah, so that's kind of a quick overview of how that works. Now moving across into the middle, and this is Audi's 3rd generation MMI system, and as you'd expect in 2021 it is snappy, it is, oh that's the wrong way, it is sharp, it is very easy to use. I mean, cars these days, they've had that long to try and perfect the infotainment screens that you kind of expect it, but yeah, Audi have done a cracking job with this. On the connected front, which I mentioned in the intro, it is kind of hard for me to mention everything because there is an awful lot this system can do, but it is more than connected enough for pretty much everybody. So you can hook it up to the internet and then it will find information and put it onto the mapping software for you, which is obviously quite cool and quite sci-fi. How often that will get used, I'm not so sure. And I think of more importance to a lot of people is going to be the fact that this car has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, and connecting your phone up is an absolute doddle. Now moving down from there, I'm glad to see that Audi have stuck with physical heater controls. I know the rest of the VAR group have gone down the digital on-screen route, so it is nice to see physical controls, as they're always nice to have. With this being a car fitted with a comfort and sound pack, oh, that's out of focus, there is also heated seats and the Bang & Olufsen speaker system. I don't think you can see down there. Now moving down here a little bit, you do see there is some storage in the middle, and that's okay. There is also some fairly generous glove box, and you've got some nice size door bins. If I was being really picky though, I would say this underarm rest bit is a little bit small and not quite big enough for a wallet and a big phone. My phone isn't particularly big, but I think if you've got a massive one, you might struggle. On to some negatives, because I've been very gushing about this interior so far. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of the grey leather. I think it's a little bit out of date, and I'd go for black. Also, whilst the majority of the materials in here are high quality and what you'd expect for an Audi, when you get down here, it does sort of show that it's a little bit cheap in areas. This is kind of not the nicest material, and I do think these cup holders, personally I prefer it if they were like damped or something, so if you just pressed it, it just came up instead of you having to manually do it. But yeah, that's just me being very picky. Overall, it is a very nice place to sit, and obviously these two screens kind of steal the show. Yeah, big thumbs up from in here. And another thing on the tech front that gets a big thumbs up from me is the fact that all of the new Audi A3s come with Audi's pre-sense safety technology. And that is sort of Audi speak for a system that looks ahead of the car and warns of hazards when it sees them, and it can even brake in an emergency situation if needed. Right, so normally at this part in one of my reviews I go over the performance stats, and this video is going to be no exception. So this car here is a 30 TFSI model, and that means it is powered by a 1 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine. Now in this example that is mated to a 6-speed manual gearbox, although it can also be optioned with a 7-speed S-tronic box. Power is rated at 110 horsepower, with the torque figure coming in at 147 pound-foot. Audi quote a 0 to 62 mile an hour time of 10.6 seconds, and they reckon that this A3 should be able to go on to do 126 miles an hour. Now whilst all of that might sound very much okay, in reality I'm not so sure. So what is the Audi A3 like to drive? Well, I'm happy to report that it is a lovely experience behind the wheel in here. This car is refined and it is comfortable, and actually for what it is, it does go down B roads surprisingly nicely. So the body roll, there is some, but there isn't enough for it to be an issue. And obviously with this being the sport car, it doesn't have the 15mm lower ride height that you'd find in the S-Line and the Volkswagen cars. And that means that actually there is plenty of suspension travel to deal with the imperfections in our road. And I think that is quite important because the roads are fairly terrible in this country. Also, whilst we're talking about going down a B road, the steering weight is well judged. I would avoid the dynamic mode though, because that just feels artificial and fake. And to be honest, in this car, it just feels like there's no point in having it. I don't know why you'd want a dynamic mode in your little family hatchback. My surprise highlight though, as I just go around here, is the gear change. And I say that's a surprise because when I found out I was going to get this Audi A3 for a week, the last thing I thought I'd be commenting on as being one of my favourite features is the gear change. But yeah, it's just really nice to use. I think it helps that this middle bit is really well designed, and that means that your hand naturally falls onto the gear stick. The gear stick itself is quite a small stubby one, and it has got a nice short throw on it, and overall, like I say, it just makes it a pleasure to use. And that, combined with the decent handling that I've mentioned previously, means that when you're on a B road like this, you can actually have a surprising amount of fun in this car. I wasn't expecting to be able to hustle it along and to have a bit of a grin on my face. Like I say, mostly it's down to this gear change. I don't know, it's just really nice and satisfying to use. But yeah, it grips and it goes around the corners really well. On a cruise there is a little bit of road noise, however with this car it's got the Bang & Olufsen speakers, so that really isn't an issue. You can easily drown it out. Unfortunately, there is quite a big gripe I have with this car, and it is model specific, and it is to do with the engine. So this car is the 30 TFSI, and that means it has the 1 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged engine, and I believe it's producing around 110 horsepower. Unfortunately, I just don't think that is enough. You see, like I say, this car is a very refined thing to drive about in, and because of the screens and because of the ambience in the interior, it does feel like quite a plush experience. However, that engine does leave something to be desired, because your kind of ambience and your nice expensive experience is ruined by the fact you really have to thrash this engine to get any sort of performance out of it. It is, like I say, quite a small engine, which is something we've got used to now in bigger cars. However, due to the fact it very heavily relies on its turbocharging, when you're below 2000 RPM, nothing happens, and there really is no point in revving it out past 5. I will say that when you sort of just use the middle rev range, which is obviously what's been designed to be happiest in, it is perfectly adequate. However, personally, I just want a little bit more performance in my cars. I feel like when you want to get out of the way of something, or when you want to accelerate onto a motorway, it is nice to have some in reserve. And I feel like having more in reserve would match the overall refinement that this car offers. I reckon you'd be better off going for the 35 TFSI model, as that comes with a 1.5 litre engine. And I think it's got 150 horsepower, and I reckon that'd completely get rid of the issues I have with this engine. I do have another slight gripe, and that is that during low speed manoeuvrability, I have found myself checking out the windows more often than I'd like. And I think that is because your window line at the back is quite small. You've got quite big pillars, and obviously these ones are just over your head here, and that means that there are sort of blind spots. Obviously this car has sensors all around. This one has the option that brings that. It also has a rear view camera, so that helps. However, I have found myself double and triple checking, which isn't something I particularly like when I'm trying to do some low speed parking. I think it's something you would get used to. You see, there's an example of this engine just not having the power. Yeah, just when you fall out of the revs, it's just completely useless. But what was I saying? Yeah, you would probably get used to sort of looking out and the visibility you've got, but for me, I just thought it's worth mentioning really. Basically because this car is overall a pretty positive experience. Like I say, it is refined, it is comfortable, and for most people that is going to be all that matters. Just quickly, I should mention the fuel economy, if I can just find it on this display. Long term, I'm getting 42 mpg. That could easily be mid-40s, and I think 50 is very much attainable too. So yeah, driving, it is a refined place to be. It's comfortable, it goes down a B road surprisingly well. I love the gearbox. However, I would just get the bigger engine because I feel having more power would complement the rest of the package a lot more nicely. So how do we conclude this video? Well, I think if we throw it back to my intro, the latest generation A3 is as described by Audi. It is just about sporty, but it is most definitely fully digitalised, a word I cannot pronounce still, and it is also very much connected. The interior is spectacular. But more importantly, and with that marketing stuff put aside, I reckon that the latest generation Audi A3 deserves to be as successful as the previous generation models. It's a very nice and refined package. I don't think anybody will be disappointed if they go for this car. Personally though, I would avoid the 30 TFSI model and go for the 35, as I think it suits the car better. So yes, I've been Bleak, thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.